Hi, this is Michael Becker, and welcome to this Tinderbox lesson. And with me today is Gernot Weise. He is over in Basel, Germany, and he is a IT and programs product manager by trade and professional work. But he is also his other profession is he's an author. He's a scriptwriter. He's a playwright, and he is going to show us his workflow for how to essentially write his books and produce his knowledge through and with Tinderbox. So, Gernot, welcome. Thank you very much for joining us.
Hello, Michael. Thanks for having me and thanks for the invitation.
Yeah, I'm super excited to see what you have to show with us. So let's just jump right in. If you can go ahead and share your screen with us. And what we're going to do in this lesson is we're just going to basically have him walk us through his workflow on how he goes about producing his material. And what we'll then do, and I'll ask him questions along the way to help guide what we're seeing here. And so first and foremost, I love the preamble that we were having a bit in our call. So before you dig into this particularly, can you go ahead and kind of give a bit of your background, maybe 2-3 minutes with how you came across Tinderbox, how you came back to it at some point, and what stimulated your creativity?
Yeah, okay. I started with Tinderbox in version 6 years ago maybe, and I was trying to migrate my Zettelkasten, slip a box of many notes. So it has about today 7,000 notes, so which I collecting since more than 20 years. And I have moved it from different, I started with Access, and then in version 5, I thought I can migrate this to Tinderbox, but it just didn't really work for myself. So then I moved this to, nowadays I have it in WordPress and a content management system. This works pretty well. But I also wanted to work with Tinderbox for my writing, to organize my writing. I think I'm from a writing style. I'm an outliner, so I always want to prepare my stories before I start writing the story. So I went back to Tinderbox basically beginning of this year because I had the intention to review my first novel. So I'm now on the version 4. And I did another review, and I was not really getting somewhere, and I thought maybe I could do something with Tinderbox. And then I started in beginning of this year building, setting up something, not really a workflow, but it emerged like a workflow also with your help, Michael. Thanks again for that, and also from the forum. And to implement something in Tinderbox which I can use to organize my writing. So I'm not writing in Tinderbox itself. I just keep the meta information for all the scenes. So my current novel has about 60 scenes roundabout. So at the moment it has 200 pages. And there are 60 different scenes with different teams, with different perspectives, with different players. And to organize all that, I came up for this workflow emerged, this was.
So, and I think you said you're actually not writing as of yet in Tinderbox. So what are you using to actually write the play?
I'm using Tinderbox to prepare and to outline my stories. So usually I work with the 4-act methodology. So there's a setup, and the second act is the phase or the act where all the complications are set up or organized, and then the third act there are described the complications, and then the climax is in the 4th act. So that's basically the main concept I'm writing with. And then for each scene, I'm also working with Dramatica. This is a software development tool for developing characters and stories. And basically that's my technical background for outlining the stories. So, and I put all the information for every scene, what are the players, for example, or what's the time to which chapter belongs a certain scene. And I keep basically organizing the meta information for my story. When I'm done with that, or when I have this somehow outlined, goes always in parallel, then I switch to Scrivener. And in Scrivener, really do the writing. But I just keep some notes in Tinderbox, but usually I write in Scrivener.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, and I've used Scrivener quite a lot lately. I've been gravitating more to Tinderbox for my own writing because of the nature of my writing, and two, I've gotten pretty wickedly good at the HTML and Markdown language and Pandoc and all of those other advanced stuff. But I can totally see the symbiotic synergies between Scrivener and Tinderbox Flow. That's very exciting. So I get it.
Also very good for my workflow. It's also very nice because in Tinderbox this is more this thinking through the story, think behind what's going on or who's playing which role in the story. And if I go to Scrivener, then I'm really focusing just writing. Then I forgot basically everything for the next 1 hour. And then I just write my scene or my story. And then I can all leave this out of for the moment and can focus on writing. And Tinderbox is more the workshop basically to build to put everything together, to cook.
Perfect. And can you tell me what is you mentioned another application, Thematica or Thematic? What was that?
It's Dramatica. It's in a software site also from California, where it's almost 20 years old, which is used to analyze movies. And you also can write movies, or you can establish a storyline. So it's basically 4 storylines, which is quite a methodology behind, which needs a little bit to get into, but it's basically my basics if I build my stories, I use Dramatica, and there's also different terms for describing a theme or a point of view, so-called through lines. And also to build a premise, you can do that with that methodology. It's not only a software, there's also a software behind, but it's also a methodology for it.
Got it. And again, just so I'm clear, the software is called Dramatica. It starts with a D, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Got it. All right. And do you know what company I'm trying to find it? There it is, Dramatica Pro. Okay, cool. So I found it. I just want to make sure we put it to the list. So, okay, great. We've got the backdrop. So let me, can you walk us through your workflow now?
Yeah. So basically what I have here, can you see?
I can.
Okay. Basically what I have here is the main container is the story outline. So what I already mentioned, I usually work, this also comes from Dramatica, with the 4 acts. So there's a 4 acts, usually the first act, the second act, the third act, and the fourth act. And every act is basically the same structure again. Of course, you could do it with more chapters, but it also comes from Dramatica. I always when I start outlining the story, I have 4 chapters for each act. So basically always the same logic behind is always set up, then some complication, then confrontation, and then outcome, the solution basically. Yeah? Something you learn. So if you take an example, so I write in German, these are some texts which I provided here. For example, you need to learn something at the first act, maybe a language you learn, then you have to follow particular rules when you go to a school. Maybe there will be some potential for further conflicts. These conflicts might bring up further complications, which will be set up here for example, by following necessary steps in the school. Then there might be this complication might come to a confrontation in the third act or a chapter in the first act, which maybe you will be criticized for trying something. And this will then lead to an outcome in the last chapter of the first act, which then will lead to the next act and so on. So this is basically a lot of story theory behind, or which you can use your own story theory, but basically I build this based on this theory. This everything is divided into 4 parts. Now you have 4 acts, 4 chapters, and every chapter for the time being has also 4 scenes, basically. This can be more, of course, but for the first draft, I usually try to start with this, and this really pretty works well for my first drafts. When I'm doing, also when I'm thinking about the story, I always try to think, what's the setup for my story idea? What's the complication? What's the confrontation? And what's the outcome? And basically drill down.
And do those 4 scenes not only mirror themselves within each act, but across the whole movie? So it's like, is the act 1 about setup and act 2 about complication, act 3 is about confrontation, and act 4 is about outcome?
Yeah, exactly. It's basically how it is. No? If you see it like this here, then you see the 4 acts. This is a very high level. This is the chapter level.
I see. So you've got that same structure across the entire movie, and then that same structure within each of the individual acts, and then potentially within each of the individual scenes. So there's a parallel of consistency or conformity, if you will, in terms of the logic and the experience that someone's having.
Exactly. And basically what you see then in the movie or in the book, you only see the scene view. No? You don't see this chapter. You don't see basically that's how you write. That's also the level. That's basically more structural information, exactly how you said that. There is a first act, but usually if you work on a scene, you only work on the scene. So this is only a structural information. But if you then go to the scene level, then you see, then you have one scene where you have some meta information basically from the act, from the chapter. And also there's a story goal for the entire movie, pursue happiness or pursue some money or whatever you want to, whatever your goal is, or to learn a language, like in the example, now you want to learn a language, the overall goal, and this is then breaking down into further smaller goals on every scene. So this is my logic, what I have taken from writing schools is every scene for me has a goal. Every scene needs to accomplish something from the hero, from the protagonist, or from the point of view player. And there's also a story point to be made. As an author, I have an intention to write a scene, and that's usually the story point, which I also try to keep for each scene. There is a goal, so to pursue something, to deliver a news, or to make an appointment with someone, which maybe I cannot make the appointment because the other guy in that scene doesn't want to make that appointment. And the story point could be the story point usually could be make allowance for something, or evaluating something's performance. Going to a language school, asking for the next course and trying to find out if it's the right school for me. Could be as a basic example. And this is, I'm putting this in the scene.
Okay, so let me pause you here real quick, and I want to talk about just the mechanics of Tinderbox. And I think this could be helpful for our discussion as we think through and help guide people through what they're seeing here. So bear with me if you will. So the areas in purple above, what you call the story outline, those are actually your raw notes and the notes that you're putting up in your file, and the way you're organizing them and you're constructing them. And if you don't mind, can you click out of text view? Click to the text view, not the preview.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. And so just so we see that, again, one of the powerful things of Tinderbox is you can essentially abstract your content, the essence of what you're trying to write, from its attributes. So, and then those attributes allow you to action on that information. So in this particular item, you've got Act 1, Scene 1. And so you've got my number equals 1, and this is chapter 1, and you've got some meta information, aka attribute values about that particular scene, correct? And can you click on scene 2? So you'll see here my number is 2. So you easily could have called that my scene as well, or scene number, or whatever label you wanted to put on that. And so you've effectively gone through and organized your notes and used the attributes essentially to give you some actionable insight that you could draw upon to be able to then look at your data through a variety of different lenses. And as you mentioned, for you, the outline view is a very powerful tool for your ability to work with your data. So I think the key insight first and foremost when people looking at your file is everything under story outline are the actual notes of your story. The items with the little round dots, scene view, play view, and arc view, those are actually agents. And I think it's really, really important that people that are looking at your file and understanding this get a sense of what's happening. So what you've effectively done is you've created an agent that goes throughout all of your Tinderbox file and searches for different attributes. And you have 3 different kind of agent views, if you will, that you're using to convey your file. So can you click on scene view for us?
Yeah.
Don't expand it. Just click on the note.
Okay. Yeah, this is basically
so if I click on there, so if we look there, you're saying go to the path, which is basically story outline, and find everything that is labeled level element. And then if you don't mind, can you do me a favor? Can you hit Command 1?
Sorry?
Hit Command 1. I want to open up the document inspector.
Okay.
And then click on the little setting icon on the right. And then click on sort on the far left. Okay, so and then you're sorting by my number. So that helps you then to get that numerical ordering of your scene. So essentially you're telling Tinderbox, go out, find all of the scenes, all of those things I've labeled as elements, right? And so in this regard, when I'm seeing from your logic, you've effectively, you're calling a scene an element, and an element has an order number, which you've put in, and that allows you to pull that view. And then if we look at the plot view, can you show me that one?
Yeah.
No, you don't need to expand it. I just want to look at the query first. And so this one, again, you're saying, go find me all my elements. And you're doing that again. So now this is, I think, what's particularly powerful, again, about Tinderbox is you can do your writing and you can do your thought logic and you can do your organization. You can then apply attributes on that information and values to those attributes that allow you to later take action. And in this case, it looks like you have the same, essentially you have the same search query for all 3 of your attributes. But now if you don't do me a favor, if you click on preview.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. And then you click on preview on plot view, and now you click on preview on scene view. Okay. Same query, pulling the same notes, but you're now getting a very different view. And I'm assuming you're doing that because you have different, essentially export templates that you've applied, or preview templates that you're applying to the file.
Maybe as a background from a writing perspective, sometimes it's very, or for me, I think it's very valuable to have this information. One, the scene view is basically the basic view when you buy the book or see the film. Then you see scene 1, then you will read scene 2, 3, 4, and so on. But on the plot view, it's more interesting. This is more from an engineering perspective or from an author perspective. What means to have the first and the second scene? In this scene, for example, I want to describe or I want to show a personal problem my hero or my protagonist have. This is the power actually of Tinderbox to have different views of the same information. It's just basically on a filter, as Mike described it.
Yeah, and let me just so we're clear too. There's Tinderbox Views, which we'll say are map view, outline view, tree map view, timeline view, etc. But then there are also what we'll call templating views. And I think and I use the same methodology when I talk about it. For example, I run a lot of business reports. So I think one of the powerful things that you're demonstrating to us here is if you look at your notes, you have your notes and your notes have text on them and your notes have values and attributes. Then determining on which template you choose to use to present that information, you can mix and match and change how that information is presented in a very interesting way. And so therefore, you spend your time creating your knowledge, and then you can then represent that knowledge in a whole different ways that helps your thinking. That's what I hear you saying, correct?
Yeah, that's actually also what I really like with Tinderbox, that you can do in Tinderbox all the things what you can forget when you go to Scrivener and writing. But in Tinderbox, you really can focus on, okay, what is my scene number one? Which time does it, in which chapter does it belong? Why is it there? What has it to do with the personal problem? What do I need maybe to emphasize in that scene? And that's exactly the power, what you can highlight and emphasize with Tinderbox, that you can create different views or the different.
And again, so for example, you're pulling in the name of the note, and then another attribute, which is essentially what you're calling the hook scene or the character moment or the love scene. And again, what's so powerful with Tinderbox is you can create that little value, that insight, as you're writing that particular note, and then render it in a different way. So if you don't mind, can you pop up to your templates section really quick and expand the templates? And so let's just show people how that works. So you'll see, no, let's go ahead. So go look at scene. No, you can leave them all open. That's fine. So you can look at scene, and what we're seeing here in this template. Can you explain that a little bit and talk through the values?
Yeah. So basically, the header information of the scene view. So that is how I use it. Is basically show all the scenes 1 to 64 in that example, and give a little bit an overview how many scenes have been worked on. So I basically determine this by the checkbox. The scene which I have checked, this is the scene I have already written in version 2, 3, or whatever. And then also take the number of all scenes and see and show that in the meta information. If you click here on the scene view, you will see at the same time. That's basically what it is here. So 9 scenes are in status light blue. On the other 64, the other 50 something scenes, they are in status pink. That's basically 14%. So have been written. So it means I just started with the review, or with the third or the fourth version of my novel in that example. So, and then for every scene, so then I call here the template for every single scene. And in the scene, I basically ask here if the scene is to which act does it belong to. I can see that via the grandparent. This is just the blue ones here, learning about something, for example. Then I show this here with as a headline. And if it's already shown, then I just print out the scene name in that example and some information. Which scene is it? What kind of a scene is it? Is this a character moment? Is this a key scene, or is it something else? But you can change that here very quickly to anything else what you would like to show in that overview.
Right, and just so we can explain to people again, so what you're essentially doing is you're using what in Tinderbox language is called export code, which is essentially the language that Tinderbox uses for creating templates. And export code can go in both templates as well as inline within your text. And and again, if you look at the Tinderbox ATB ref file, you can see all of the instructions and explanations on how to do this. And you'll note, for example, where he has here, the little caret, that's the Shift 6 on your keyboard, and then you type value, parenthesis, name, parenthesis, caret. And that's essentially telling Tinderbox, go out to, with the note that you're currently processing, pull the attribute name and put it into the text. Similarly, pull my scene. And so that's how you're now able to render that information. And the information above on the element of the template that's above, he's actually doing similar calculations, saying sum up the number of items that are here and sum up the values of the other elements of these notes, so I know and can track how much of the work I've actually done. So that's a really, really powerful tool and utility that you're doing. So again, what you're able to do is those items under story outline, under the learning about, the story outline, excuse me, are all of your notes and is your entire play. And then everything else in this file are just basically tools that Tinderbox provides you to be able to conduct analysis and create different views of your notes. Now, I see a couple of other things that I think are interesting in your file. Can you go down and tell us about the players and the chapter views? Like what's going on there? Like chapter views an agent, but players are not. They're actually notes. So, and tell me a little bit about that.
Maybe quickly, just for the plot view, it's basically the same view. I'm only showing this in with a different layout. But just here, maybe I have done this here a bit differently, or in the arc view, maybe this is basically different. So here I basically have built a structure in that template where I ask, okay, if this is number 1 or greater or less than 10, then it belongs to the hook, for example. This is just another view how to see a story. So this is basically a change arc. Now this is a disillusionment plot arc. This is also from story theory, and there are different stages in the story. And I basically determine in this arc view to which stage a certain scene belongs. And this is a little bit different here. So I ask here for the numbers. If the number is 16, the scene number is equal or greater or less than 17, for example, then this scene belongs to the first plot point. Which basically is a little bit different than the scene on the plot view, but can also be very powerful to get more information or an overview on the story flow or on the story structure behind your story.
So it's still being represented chronologically in terms of the order of the scenes. But now what you're doing is you're interjecting plot, basically. I guess I'm not an author in this case, so I'm not.
Yeah,
I'm not.
It's basically there are different methodologies or different story theories how you can outline your story on they call it a change arc, for example. A protagonist starts very, you like the disillusionment plot. This is an arc. Yeah? It's the main character starts off with an admirable set of ideals, and then he is disillusioned at the end of the story. And there are certain phases in that whole story. And these phases have different names and different functions. And you have the powerful tool, or with Tinderbox is a powerful tool to basically outline or highlight these different phases and assign the scenes to these phases and make this visible also for you. I think that's powerful. So very often you see that when you Google that for plot, for example, then you see that arc, but when you have 100 or 50 scenes, that's very complicated to know, okay, this 5-6 scenes belong into the first phase of my arc. This is maybe in the climax arc. This is at the end. This is in the middle. And Tinderbox really allows you to make this more visual, to visualize that where these scenes belong to. For example, this scene is the first plot point. It's a very important scene in an arc to get a story started, basically. Now, that's the point, always the first plot point when the protagonist or the hero decides to go for it and to make a journey to get the girl or get out for the treasure or whatever. And that's basically the most important story plot point in every story, is the first plot point.
Now, tell me, just out of curiosity, so is that happening literally at the 16th scene of the movie, or is that happening earlier in the movie, but it just happens to be showing here at number 16?
In that example, it's happening it's a key scene, and this is the number 16 in that example, but could be also in another movie, could be number 3 or number 4. That's always depends on your story structure. No?
Got it.
If you follow this methodology, or if you follow this and say, I have a first plot point, maybe some you will have a story without a plot point, then you do it in a different way. But if you use plot points, or if you use that methodology or this kind of arcs, then you might have a first plot point. In that example, in this particular example, it's number 16, but could be also number 10. Then you just would code it here, then you would change that just here and would say it's not 16, it's 15, or it's 10, or whatever it is. Now, I always, when I work with that, I sometimes think, okay, that's my scene, that's my first plot point, for example. Now, then I think, okay, this is number 10. Maybe next day I say, no, it's number 11 actually, it's not number 10. Number 10 only prepares that, and number 11 is actually the point where the protagonist commits to the story and really goes for it.
Now, you wouldn't change that here in the template. You would actually change that in the note, correct? Or would you modify the template?
No, in that case, I would change that in the template. Like here, I would just say, okay, it's not 16. Maybe overnight I was thinking it through again, and then I said, no, it's not 16. It's 14, and then I just changed that here, and then you see that here immediately. And now where is it? Yeah, now this scene is then I also have to change that again. Yeah. But basically it's now, no, wait. Up view, sorry. Yeah, now the first plot point is now, it's coming here, and it's always depends how you move this around.
Yeah, no, I see. And again, so it's just a tool for thinking and logic. Now, the other thing I think is interesting too, you're also aligning your players. So you've got the ruler, the lover, the magician. So you're basically creating the archetype players within your play. And then if you can click on one of those, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Right. And again, here you're using attributes, like click on ruler, for example, and look at text. You're using attributes to define these people, like name and age and their role in the play and their goal. And again, you can then presumably in the text area, you could write up a little bio or a persona of this person if you wished and you wanted to create that level of detail. I could see that being incredibly valuable, and especially too if you're writing multiple plays or a series, the ability to then have these kinds of notes and then be able to leverage them for future books. Again, I think or plays. Tinderbox, I think, makes it really easy to be able to go back to those atomic elements. Whereas if you use other kinds of tools where it's all crammed together, make it much more difficult to do that. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And then do me a favor, if you don't mind, can we also take a look at your chapter outline and your timeline, your chapter view and your timeline view? Those two are I think new.
Yeah, chapter view is very straightforward. This is basically just an attribute. For each scene, I have an attribute. And if you go open this here and then you put here my chapters called the attribute, that's something, it's very straightforward.
Yeah. And so that's just giving you the list of chapters. And then finally on timeline view, I find that really interesting. And essentially what you can do there is what?
Timeline view is basically, it's also basically an attribute where I say, sometimes it's important when you outline your story that you keep track of the time of the slot where the scene is happening, that you have a logical one scene after the other, or if you maybe have a long timeline or a short timeline, that you know, okay, this was Wednesday, then on Thursday, there's the next scene. So and keep track of this. I have also an attribute, it's called, I think my time slot, exactly. And that it's only a string information. You can also put there a real, I think there was a discussion on the forum to use a real date, but in my example, usually also in Screenplays, it's enough to have Wednesday midnight or only night and day. So for me, it was important in the example at least to have days and the time. So it's this early morning, it's this day, it's this night, it's this midnight, on which weekday, so Wednesday. And then the template works the same. I ask here if this is still the same time, then show the headline for this 3 or 4 scenes. If it's another date, then or another time slot, then print a new header, make a small icon for day or night, and then print the scene name.
I see. And so you're essentially able to do a quick look and say, okay, is this happening at night? Is this happening during the day? What's the context?
Yeah, exactly. And also to understand the logic behind that, you can keep, at least for when I'm writing, sometimes it's very difficult to keep track of this, that okay, this was on Wednesday, then the next day should be, or this cannot be a Monday, or maybe it could, but...
Right, yeah, the next day can't be a Monday unless they're time traveling.
Yeah, that's a whole different book. Maybe it was a night, and next day was a day, and sometimes if you keep that separate, also the scenes, then you will forget what's happening in the first, in the scene before, that you just can keep track of it. Maybe it's not important for the story itself, but it's also helps you to visualize, or at least for me, it helps me to visualize something. What is happening at night it's a different atmosphere, it's a different context for the story, and if something happens midday, then it's the mood might be very different from the character point of view.
I see. And what I don't see you doing, unlike Roberto in the previous conversation I had about using Tinderbox in this way, is it doesn't seem you're calculating the interval time, like this scene is 5 minutes or this scene is 10 minutes. Are you doing that or no? No,
it's not. For a novel, for a book, it's not important. But I understood this when I saw your video with Roberto. But you could also add an attribute for that, of course. But for a novel, it's not. What I have in my current project, work in progress, I have an attribute for the page numbers, that I just have a track how many pages I have already, and maybe also where's the midpoint. Maybe that I can see, okay, this is 100 pages, this somehow fits now the story as well.
Right, and for those that might be watching, I can see where the confusion is. So Tinderbox has a view itself called timeline view. So for you, the term timeline view does not mean seeing the items chronologically over a horizontal view. For you, it's again looking at that kind of situational context of day-night timing. But again, I think that's very cool. And so, well, thank you very much. And as we wrap up, is there any kind of last-minute thoughts, any recommendations that you want to give people to consider as they go exploring this tool called Tinderbox? And maybe you could highlight, like, what were some of your breakthroughs that got you to a point where you're actually having some efficient and effective use with the tool?
Also for me, it was really this combination to have this structure information that you see that in one, also to have this export. I never used that export before because I never really understood why I need this export. So, but when I really discovered this feature, it's really funny actually. So, and when we really discovered this, I really understood the power of it. So it's really, Tinderbox is preparing the meal or the writing session, and then exporting it, closing Tinderbox, and just work with the export files in my browser and Scrivener in parallel, and use that as a kind of a master cookbook for writing. Then I really can serve or click to a scene then and go into more detail, and then open. I think that was the first breakthrough. The second was, of course, the combination between having an overview on all the scenes in that example, and then drill down into a scene and combine all the different. I think this was the most important part for me, or is the most important part for me today when I'm writing, that you have one scene and you have gathered all the information from the different places. Here you have a kind of a meta header information for the scene. Here you have the scene itself. Here's some notes, and I really actually love this part of it, that you already see. This is why there's another attribute called My Cast, and I assign for every scene the casts which are playing in a scene, and then I print here the attributes or the behaviors or the character traits for every player. So basically this is based on the Enneagram which I use for developing the players, and then see this also I may have conflicts, or also this is also for story, for inspiration while I'm writing. I think that's very powerful. I really love this part of the tool with the export. I really I underestimated that in the beginning. This was really a great learning.
And I think the important thing too, and I think why people often will underestimate is they'll see the word export and they'll think, well, I'm not exporting, and they don't realize that export, no. What export code does is it allows you to, how did you word it? Pull disparate pieces of information all into one place. And then in this context, preview it, right? To take a look at it in one aggregated view.
And you have basically like a content management system. No? You have it's like a book, it's like a cookbook. No? You export it. And if you then do the real work for, in my case, the writing, the novel or the story, then you just take that master cookbook, what you in the past, you basically had a lot of paper on your desk. And today it's basically an HTML cookbook, which I open in my browser, and then I can serve. And usually, of course, I in parallel open then Tinderbox again, because I just came up with another attribute I could add to my story. So it's basically always in back and forth, but I really love this. To export this, have this HTML big file, cookbook, whatever you want to, master file maybe. I think they also call it in movies, they call this master book or a master file. Everything is in there, and then you can also drill down based on the player level. No? And depends on the views or the agents you will set up here in my current project. I think I have now 15 agents with different views on the player, on the situations, and that's the great thing. If you have another idea, you just need another attribute, and to think about a new attribute, and then you can just build a new view and have a new view on your story on a meta level. That's very powerful for writing.
Yeah, and and again, I think it's how does Mark Anderson, his joke is, how the song is, if you love it, put a ring on it. If it's an important idea, put an attribute on it, right? Break it out and help you understand it. And this is a really exciting thing. So, and I agree. I think so. Your whole idea was to really utilize this tool to kind of break up your thinking, to be able to view your thinking, to be able to actually help you think and consider new ways. Anything else you want to share with our audience and key takeaways to help them, break through? I mean, when you start with a blank Tinderbox file, it can be very intimidating. So, what would you suggest people do?
Now, when I started, I think I heard this, or I read this in the forum, or I heard this in some of the videos, that you just should start with the blank file, and then a structure will emerge. I think this I really like. It's different than in other tools. In other tools, you spend a lot of time to try to understand how this works. And in Tinderbox, you really can start with basically like here with the story. Okay, my story, I have an idea for a story. Just put down the four main headlines, and then make a further drill down. And this is basically what Tinderbox really supports, this idea to start really on a high level, and then still break it further down, and then add attributes. I think that's really powerful with these attributes. I have done this basically a lot with Excel before. I really used Tinderbox in that way. No? I always was doing that a little bit with Excel, and this is so time consuming because you always keep that. Excel is also for that kind of structuring information a good tool, but it's cost too much time at the end. No? And
the challenge with Excel is it's very limiting. So you essentially use column heads like attributes and row items as note names. But as you pointed out, as you start, as your storyline grows, as your storyline evolves, Excel almost immediately breaks down and falls apart because it lacks the flexibility to be able to move things around efficiently. Whereas with Tinderbox, you've got that inherently in there.
And what I also learned, maybe as a tip, what I also learned, I'm really like it also now to keep that writing and that meta, or you say that maybe, also this writing process in Scrivener on the thinking process in Tinderbox. So I also had a time where I was combining this, and I tried to have the same names in Tinderbox and Scrivener. Now I'm not doing this anymore because this was very time consuming. It's the best way to have one tool, for me at least in that example, or in that case, is to have this in Tinderbox, all the thinking, how the scene or how the book or how the story should run like, or how, what is the story about, and all that questions you have if you build up a story. And then writing story, you can focus on really on what you want to write and what you want to say. I think that's also really also this really helped me nowadays to keep that separate and have also
and in other cases, not, you know, like as I mentioned earlier, for me, having them all in one place is really helpful, partly because I have, you know, you've seen it in some of my videos, I have spelling challenges. And so I find what's really helpful, if I've spelled it wrong in one place, if I keep my writing and my thinking in the same place, when I fix any errors, it propagates throughout all of the file, and I find that really helpful. But again, to your point, you talked about some really great tools for you: Dramatica, Tinderbox, Scrivener, and that ecosystem of workflow tools is just helping you to accomplish this. So first and foremost, thank you very much for spending the time. I'm really grateful for you kind of methodically walking us through this. Demonstrating how this can be, you know, this incremental formalization can get there. And I like the point that you raised before, you know, start with the blank file and let it incrementally build, because when people look at a file like this and they see it in what we'll call the near finished state, it can be incredibly intimidating. They're like, oh, I can never do that. And the reality is you absolutely can. You just start with a blank file and slowly build it over time. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. And we'll publish the video, and I'm sure people will be able to share questions for you through the forum. You know, as they try to adopt and use your methods.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Michael.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.